Space Coconut.
So today, I'll be sharing my personal Ghen Arcanum Weaver deck. Arcanum? Whatever. While this deck, of course, uses the traditional enchantment win cons that exist in other Genchantress decks, what I do differently here is I make my opponents attack each other in order to protect myself in order to set up our win cons onto the battlefield and win the game. So first, the win cons. Rakdos Charm. yeah, I'm serious. We won't be wiping the board, and our opponents should be able to make a pretty wide army, especially when they start working together to take you out. Their life totals will be slowly getting lower and lower, and at the right time, you can hit them with the last selection on Rakdos Charm that says each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. If they have a ton of creatures waiting to attack you and a low life total, then this will be the last thing your opponents will see. Horde of Ambition will make your opponents lose life or cards, making it much more difficult to deal with you before they lose all of their life. Court of Ire will let you shoot a target for 2 or 7, depending on if you have Monarch. Court of Grace will give you tokens for blocking or angels for attacking, depending on if you have Monarch or not. And talking about Monarch, with your shields up and your opponents attacking each other, keeping Monarch is usually pretty easy. And keeping Monarch for long periods of time throws a clock on the game that will run out very quickly, especially when combined with your other enchantments. Descent into Avernus will give you and your opponents treasures to cast more stuff, but everyone is also dealt that much damage. If things get dicey, you can sacrifice this enchantment before it kills you and exchange it for something else with Ghen. Mana Barbs hits everyone for 1 damage when they tap a land for mana. But with our treasure generation, this becomes less of a problem. Brilliant Restoration is here because my wife is using Replenish in her absurd Zur deck, but casting this with a graveyard full of enchantments should win you the game, within a turn or two by the time you can actually cast it. Ethereal Armor can make any of your creatures very big and potentially win games for you. And of course, we have Revel in Riches that can come out for a surprise win if you have 10 treasures available, along with Eldrazi Conscription and Overwhelming Splendor to get onto the field for a huge discount with Ghen. Next, to make our opponents attack each other, we have Parasitic, Shiny, and Martial Impetus. Shiny Impetus is my favorite because your opponents will make treasure tokens for you when they attack, since you own the enchantment. Goading your opponent's largest creature will be a bad day for the other opponents while they struggle to deal with it and the enchantment, as you sit back and continue building your wall of enchantments. Vow of Duty and Vow of Torment will prevent a creature from attacking you at all, so stacking this with a goading enchantment basically turns an opponent's creature into your own little pet. I don't have a Vow of Lightning, but it belongs in this deck with the others. But what if our opponent's big creature has Hexproof or Shroud? Well, Ghen doesn't target anything. It simply says, put it on the battlefield. And auras say that they enter the battlefield attached to objects. But none of the words they use in any of those sentences are target. So you can use Ghen's ability to put auras on hexproof and shrouded creatures. Have fun explaining that to the table. Rite of Raging Storm will give everyone a 5/1 with trample and haste for their turn, and while your opponents don't have to attack with it, you can still benefit from their elemental dying most of the time. Since you can't goad all of your opponent's creatures, we need to set up a wall to convince them to attack everyone else. Sphere of Safety and Ghostly Prison are here, of course, but my brother-in-law gifted me No Mercy a while back, and it's a wonderful addition here, destroying any creature that deals damage to you. The really mean thing that happens here with Sphere of Safety is when you have Mana Barbs out at the same time. I've had opponents pay 10 mana and 10 life to attack me with 2 creatures. This is a very brutal tax effect. Silent Arbiter will allow only 1 creature to attack or block at a time, giving us much needed time in a match. Sigil of the Empty Throne won't make us a lot of angels, but it should be enough to make our opponents attack each other or not attack at all if they're trying to be nice to the opponents. Rule of Law will keep the spell slinging in check since we often can't throw out several enchantments and still keep mana available up to activate Ghen. First Response will make you tokens if you get hit. Archon of Sun's Grace will make flying 2/2s, and as long as it's on the board, they get lifelink also. Outlaw's Merriment will throw out 3 different tokens, all of which you can throw at your opponents with Abandon to gain a benefit or hang back as blockers. Protection of the Heckma is here to protect against aristocrat strategies that can get around our wall of enchantments. Now, talking about protection, We have Flicker of Fate to protect an enchantment if you need it to stay active or you want to activate its ETB again. Lapse of Certainty is my favorite white counterspell, and Red Elemental Blast, which will stop a Cyclonic Rift from bouncing all of your enchantments to your hand. Seal of Cleansing and Seal of Doom will take care of a problematic artifact, enchantment, or non-black creature. Wither Crown will neuter a creature and hurt your opponent unless they sacrificing it, putting it in the graveyard, so Ghen can put it on something else again. Now, of course, we need to draw cards. Anye, whatever, Falconwrath will let us ditch an expensive enchantment and draw a card we might be able to use. Arvinox the Mind Flail will let us exile cards from the bottom of each opponent's libraries, and then we can cast them as long as they're exiled. Now, since it says cast, we can't play lands, but that should be a non-issue. Magus of the Wheel will let everyone discard their hands and then draw 7 cards. Merchant of the Veil will let us discard a card and then draw a card, once for 1 red at instant speed for its adventure cost, and then for 3 mana later if it's on the battlefield. Norika Yamazaki the Poet doesn't draw cards, but she lets you cast an enchantment from your graveyard if she attacks. Gravebreaker Lamia will let you tutor for an enchantment and throw it into the graveyard to pull up with Ghen later, but if it's on the field when Norika attacks, you'll get a discount for the enchantment you cast as well. Faithless Looting, Tormenting Voice, Thrill of Possibility, and Wheel of Fate will let us discard cards and draw more cards. Big Score does this too, but it gives us 2 treasures also. Perpetual Timepiece doesn't draw cards, but it throws them into the graveyard for Ghen to get back later. Timuret Calls the Dead will put 6 cards into your graveyard in total, and you have the option of exiling a creature to make a 2/2 zombie. You can exile an enchantment, but if you do, you can't get it back with Ghen. Doom Foretold will force an opponent to sacrifice a non-land, non-token permanent, and if they can't, they discard a card and lose 2 life. Then you get to draw a card and gain 2 life and create a 2/2 Knight with Vigilance. Fable of the Mirror Breaker gives you a token that makes treasure, lets you loop for 2 cards. It becomes less useful for us once it transforms, but it can be a creature target for our auras or a blocker that we can get back with Ghen. Experimental Frenzy turns your library into your hand, but gets tricky if you hit a land pocket. But you can get rid of it for 4 or swap it with something else with Ghen. Treacherous Blessing will help us get 3 cards and make us lose 1 life when we cast a spell. And of course we have Sunbird's Evocation, which will let us look at the top X cards of our library and cast one that is X or less, where X is the mana value of a spell we cast from our hand. And finally are the miscellaneous cards in the deck. Blasphemous Act if you have no walls and your opponents are getting out of control. Vandal Blast is there to deal with artifact decks. Elixir of Immortality will get your graveyard back into your library if it's about to be exiled. Black Market will get you an absurd amount of mana when creatures die. Smothering Tithe will do that too when your opponents draw cards. Exquisite Blood will gain you life when your opponents take damage. So imagine that with mana barbs. Blind Obedience will make your opponent's artifacts and creatures enter the battlefield tapped. Widespread Panic is here, and I understand why, but I'll probably swap it with something that works with the deck more effectively. And then our ramp artifacts are simply Arcane Signet and Talisman of Hierarchy. And that's it. It can be quite a bit of fun jumping through hoops to get combos online, but graveyard hate is pretty painful and common these days, so watch out for that. But let me tell you, watching your opponents attack each other while they watch your walls zap their life away at the same time is a beautiful, slow death to watch. Let me know what you think of this Gentantris deck, and if you try this strategy out, let me know how it goes for you in the comments below. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike it if you disliked it, and until next time, I'm Space Coconut, and you're welcome.